anti-terror work, and stopping people from crossing the border. You're going to be harming business with all these types of things. You liberals out there, open up your minds to recognize that civil liberties are part and parcel to economic liberties. If you don't want some government invading someone's bedroom and saying who a person can make out with, then why do you want the government invading someone's place of business and saying the person with whom he can do business, or how he can do business, or what he has to pay him, or the sort of health care he has to give him? All these things are based on this utopian concept that some people can tell other people how to run their lives, and it's destructive. It's got to stop. And I think the more we can turn people onto this, and you're doing an amazing job, and I know, I'm sort of getting into a harangue right now, a monologue on promoting this idea, but look at Glenn Jacobs, folks. He is a professional wrestler. He's in the public limelight. He is taking steps that are risky steps for him, speaking out about these issues now. And so certainly I can go down to my public library and schedule a meeting, or I can talk to somebody across the counter when we're talking about gas rates and talk about the additive crap that they're putting in there, or I can be in the store and talk about how much more my bread costs because of sugar subsidies. I can lay this information out for people occasionally and do my part as best I can. I can call the local newspaper. I can call the local TV station and say, hey, there's a guy being held in New Hampshire just because he brought a freaking camera into a courthouse. What happened to the freedom of the press? Where are you people? That sort of thing can happen if a guy like Glenn can stand up and tell people all this stuff that worries them. Well, Glenn, I'm done my monologue. My soliloquy is over. Shakespeare wrote it for me. And thank you. Wouldst thou like to continue, my friend?
Well, yeah, that was great, and thanks for the compliment.
No problem, man.
But I think everyone is doing their part, and education is the key. As you said, I don't know if there are enough people, but I think more and more people are waking up every day because the situation is changing and the timing is becoming right. Just last week I talked with two guys, and we got talking about politics, about the economy.
Yeah.
And both of them didn't realize that the Federal Reserve was a private corporation. First time they'd ever heard it in their entire lives.
Wow.
That's 99% of the people out there, folks. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know that. Most people don't. One of the guys told me that he was thinking about a lot of the stuff that we talked about, because we talked about an entire spectrum of different things. So today I took him the Revolution, a Manifesto by Ron Paul, and he's going to read it.
Cool.
That's what we can all do. And we can open minds, and we can turn people on to the concepts of individual liberty and free markets, of human freedom, and the freedom of humans to interact among one another. And at this point, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Because like I said earlier, most people have never heard of the concepts that we're talking about. They aren't taught in government schools. And that's the most important first step. Sooner or later, the timing is going to be right where these concepts are going to become crystal clear to them, because the things that we talk about are coming to pass. And when that happens, that's when all the seeds that have been sown are going to start taking root and growing. I mean, if you look back, what's happening now in the libertarian movement is because of what happened during the Great Depression, when the people from the old right, Albert J. Nock and John T. Flynn, and H.L. Mencken, and those people, who, there were so few of them that they all knew one another. And what's happening right now is because those guys, I sound like Archie Bunker, those guys wouldn't allow this philosophy to die, wouldn't allow these ideas to die, and they knew it had to continue. And I think it was Nock that called them the remnant. They were the remnant that was going to keep the ideas alive, so that later on, when the time was right, they could once again flower. And I sincerely believe this, and this is what makes me so optimistic in the long term. And by long term, I don't mean hundreds of years. I mean within a decade.
Yeah.
So what makes me so optimistic is the fact that these ideas have taken root. I mean, you look at a guy like Ron Paul and what he did in the presidential election. He turned more people on to libertarianism than anyone ever has. It was wildly successful. And it's continuing. I mean, now he's on network TV, he's on the cable news channels, and they're giving him airtime, and he's talking about Austrian economics, and he's talking about individual freedom, and he's talking about all these different things. And Judge Napolitano on Fox News has his own internet show, and it's doing very well. Could you imagine that just 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah,
it wouldn't have happened. The time is now. I mean, it really is. Whether we're able to build up a critical mass, I don't know. But as Samuel Adams says, I don't even know if we have to. We just have to light the brush fires in people's minds. And sooner or later, those brush fires are going to take off. And it's going to be a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree with you, Glenn. And first, before I make any other comments, we should mention that if people have the opportunity, they can check out your appearance on Freedom Watch with Judge Napolitano. And they can go to the Freedom Watch website and see that you appeared by phone with Judge Napolitano. Yep. And he is really...
Let me tell you a story about that. It's a funny story.
Yeah.
When I was a freshman in high school, all my buddies and I, we played like D&D. We played the fantasy board.
Yeah.
So because of that, we thought we were really smart because we used terms that other people had never heard of when they were freshmen in high school.
Yeah.
Like Odin, who was the Norse overgod, is actually the father of Thor, who is my favorite cartoon character, my favorite comic book character.
Got the hammer.
Yeah, and he was omnipotent. He was all-powerful. Well, one day, our drama teacher, I believe it was Mrs. Kennedy, said omnipotent, okay? So all of us just laughed and giggled, and from then on, we would all say omnipotent.
Yeah.
So I'm on Judge Napolitano's show, right?
Yeah.
And I got distracted. I was actually looking through my Constitution. Matt's not actually keep several copies. But anyway, I was looking through my Constitution to quote it verbatim. And I was talking about the power grab by the Obama administration, which, of course, isn't really Obama's fault. I mean, it's a precedent that has been set almost since the first president.
Absolutely.
In any case, I said, we're headed towards what Ludwig von Mises called, and I had a complete blank.
So did you say omnipotent?
Yeah, I went, omnipotent government. I went, oh my God, I just said omnipotent. Mrs. Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy has come back to haunt me. And I was so embarrassed. I got off the phone. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that.
Well,
folks, the lesson here is when someone mispronounces a word, don't tease them about it and say it over and over again. Because if you ever have a blank and have to remember that word, you're going to say what you just said over and over and over again.
Yeah, no, it's sort of like when we used to play that cut of Ted Kennedy saying Osama Obama, and screwing up his name, and then sometimes I would start doing it. I'm like, no.
I do too now.
Yeah.
I always say President Obama because now I've heard that clip so much that I want to do it too.
Yeah, it's so terrible. It's like the closest I've got to Kennedy is some Irish roots somewhere, 2 counties away or something. But and Glenn, it's interesting because you're talking about your days in high school and stuff, and just for people who are new to these audios and so on, this is obviously an extended conversation, and what I like is it's I don't know if I can express it right, but it's a very interesting personal journey to learn about hidden information about human interaction, and to discover that there have been people going all the way back to Aristotle who really aren't recognized by a lot of the people out there in the majority of the media and schools and things like that, but they had it right. And then you get tapped into it, and I'm so grateful for my parents. And sometimes I wish they were here to have these conversations with us because, as you mentioned, with people like Mencken and people like Albert J. Nock and John T. Flynn, those folks back then, Hayek and Mises, they were quite alone. And my dad and my mom, they felt very much the same way. And this personal journey coming from, you mentioned, playing D&D. I remember when I was a kid, I don't know if I mentioned this to you once, but I had this, my friends and I would go outside and we would get staves, and I would put up little plastic bags out in the woods with messages, and we would have like a real life simulation of wizard things. Every one of us would be a wizard. I'd make up a story, and then when it got to be wintertime, we couldn't do it outside anymore, and so I made maps, and I had graph paper, and you could land on a castle, and you'd go inside a castle. And I had these notebooks that were sort of like, early computer programs for me, where people could choose to open up a cabinet, and there would be a monster there. And I created these life point things because I figured, okay, they have to fight the monsters, and then they can use different weapons, and they'll have a multiplier effect of the weapon on a die. So it turned out to be exactly like Dungeons and Dragons. Just organically, that's the way it happened. And it's strange because organically, you and I, we grew up in different places, but we've come to the same place.